Hey Journeys Ahead fans, I am TS Pro Art, and today I'm going to be discussing with you my initial plans for what would have been the Materia Duology, Trash Pack, and Pawfnu. Because I have decided that I'm hitting the brakes on these projects, and I'm probably going to make them from the ground up if I ever were to come back to them. This is simply because, as most of you probably already know, I want Journeys Ahead, specifically the 6 parts that are out now and completed as Draft 1s, excluding More Than Meets the Eye, to be a graphic novel series. And I feel like when I started those other projects and announcements, at the end of the first draft of the Beyond stuff, I was a little in over my head and kind of lost track of what I actually wanted to do with this project. I'm really sorry if that disappoints anyone who is looking forward to these other stories, but it's just me being truthful and honest with myself and saying that these entries, specifically the Materia Duology, would have possibly and actually ruined everything from Beyond's ending. So, let's just start with the first few things. I'm just reading this on top of my head. Let's just start with Trash Pack and Pawfnu because, those are the easier ones to explain. Initially, Trash Pack was supposed to come out after the Materia Duology, but for those that follow me on Instagram, and only Instagram, I don't really do anything else, I refuse to get Twitter, you would know that I made the change to it being before the duology. This was to help shed more light on the actual Trash Pack characters before the big ensemble that would be Rise of the Sparks. Trash Pack was always intended to be sort of a lighthearted and fun story. I really wanted to lean into a more wacky and whimsical type of nature with the narrative. This is because, as you all probably know, everything else that came before had a very dark undertone to it. So for the parts that were out, you obviously know everyone went on vacation, and Jay and friends end up getting trapped into the dream world because Quinn was mourning his sister. The plot would have been like The Goonies, Adventure Time, or, something like that, which, had the basic premise of a bunch of kids running around in an unknown world with no adults, while at the same time trying to figure out how they're going to get back home as a collective team. It's been a plot that's been done to death, and that's probably why I kind of slowed down on it, because it was kind of predictable. The story would have taken them across a lot of different biomes and strange places. Me and my friends even talked about something like a nightmare world, where there would be actual horses called nightmares. Yeah, corny, I know. Anyways, so where I left the last chapter, that big old cliffhanger, which I am very sorry to just resolve in this, I revealed that there was a very familiar looking character that came back that very clearly died in the Beyond story, which was a big moment for Jay's character. Obviously, this is Maple, of course, by her looks. But at the same time, you kind of think it's not. Shortly after where that chapter left off, Jay and Co. would approach her like, "Oh my god, how are you alive?" Like, "Oh my god, my first love is there," something like that. But they would quickly learn that this Maple wasn't actually the Maple they knew and loved. Within a flash, this Maple would have actually engaged the group into a fight before running off and scurrying into the fog. After this, Jay and his friends would give chase, and when they eventually caught up with her and tackled her, whatever they would have done, she wouldn't recognize any of them. Because the plot twist here was going to be that this version of Maple was a manifestation from all their minds. I think the plot was, if I'm recalling at this moment, that everyone wished Maple was stronger, dreamed, I should say, that she had been more of a fighter to know how to get out of the way from Lois's attack. So that collective dream from everyone wishing that she was still around would all manifest from their minds to create this version of Maple, who is a complete badass. But because of that, it strips away her cute and fun nature she had in Beyond, which kind of makes her a completely different character. Because there was a big thing I was kind of toying with with Trash Pack to say that, oh, the dream world and the Beyond stuff were kind of linked, so the manifestation thing would kind of be more out of whack, because at this point in the timeline, the Beyond was literally like broken glass. You know, it was gone. So I sort of wanted to be a thing that the dream world was a little, kind of crazy at that point. So after this, Maple, I think I was going to call her something else. I didn't really think about it, but they would have called her something else. She would have been sort of the group's guide, I guess. I think what I was going for was that when they entered, she just kind of manifested with all the knowledge of the realm, even though she was probably born like 40 minutes ago by that point. It was weird. It was strange. But she would basically give the rundown on who Droom was, who, I'm still think this guy's canon. I'm going to say this guy still exists. Was a sibling to Matira and the other gods that exist in Journey's Ahead. Because if you recall in my lore video, the Beyonders made all these gods, basically like to deal with the little things that, that think of them like think of like the Beyonders like the Queen Bee and I guess all the other gods is like worker drones. Like they dealt with the smaller shit. And so, Droom, he was one of those gods related to Matira, supposed to tie into everything else. It was basically setting up Matira. But because his book was shattered, it would have been like a chase, to collect and scramble the book together, because, you get one wish from the book. If Droom gets it, he eats dreams. Yeah, I was in over my head. I was rushing a plot. I was really rushing a plot. But I think the main takeaway was that the story would have been Quinn forgiving Jay, coming to the realization, the Trash Pack coming back together. Because the whole theme was like living in a fantasy. The dream world's a fantasy. Quinn wanting to bring Maple back was a fantasy, and he just didn't really want to live in a world like that without basically his other half. Hence why his design looks the way it does. He kind of never grew up. So when everything kind of hits the fan in the end, Droom ends up betraying him, and I think the ending was going to be up to both Jay and Quinn working together to trap him back into the book. Again, I had the basic summary of the plot down. It's just one of those things where I really need to flesh it out more. And it honestly would have sucked if I just continued, continuing just, writing on a whim. Yeah, voice crack there. But at the end of the day, the plot was really supposed to be, forgiveness and coming of age, I suppose. I just really wanted Quinn to have sort of an ending after leaving it so ambiguous with the Beyond thing. And yeah, I think the story would have ended with, this version of Maple actually, giving Quinn some recollection, even though it's not her. It kind of followed the same theme as Jida and the Beyond, where, I'm not her, but, I can say things that she can't. It was supposed to be sort of like a rhythmic rhyme thing, but I kind of felt that I was treading some old water with the plot there. I would have also included Suck Nasty in these things, but hey, maybe they'll show up in Draft 2 of the initial story, who knows. Afterwards, the gang would, they would return, and it would actually be a fun little, I actually wanted to draw a bunch of images, a slideshow of them on vacation in the Isle of Dreams, some cute like that. But I think the actual epilogue would have been Jay visiting Maple's grave again, as the story opened, but Quinn would be there, and everyone else. It would have just been a nice little everyone just hanging out with Maple, and that would have been Trash Pack. I still like some of the ideas there, but I'll be completely honest. It was just it would have felt really clunky if I were to go through with it. Yeah, that's about it. I'm definitely going to rework this thing if I ever decide to, which I don't know, I probably won't, but we'll see. Pawfnu. As you all know in the Trash Pack, I had decided that, hey, I as y'all know in Trash Pack, I decided to say that Pawfnu was going to be off doing her own thing. The story of Pawfnu, it was very bare bones from what I had in mind. Basically, it would have been a thing where she would see visions of her people. You know, like oh my god, wait, there's more of my crew are alive? What? And so she would go on this, like, self-fulfillment journey, as opposed to her family going on vacation. And the reason, the more I really think about it, it's, honest to God, just Kong's subplot in GXK. Because she would have gone to this unknown place, she would have encountered a little fox boy by the name of Skipper. And, you know, she'd be like, she'd like try and talk to him, but then she'd be like jumped by other foxes. We'd learn that there's like a tyrant, like demon fox. Like it literally, like, if you've seen Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, just replace Kong with Pawfnu, replace Zuko with Skipper. Scar King is some kind of like demon god, which I was again gonna like link back to Matira being, you know, some kind of like ancient deity that are all related. Remove Godzilla and replace all the other Kongs with like foxes and like kitsune or kitsunes. I really don't know how to pronounce it. And just think of the plot, excluding Godzilla, you would have had Pawfnu. And it would have, I don't know, like I didn't really think about it until as of late, where I'm just like, oh my god. It's literally just Godzilla X Kong. Like, if you have seen Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, or Godzilla Kong, whatever you want to call it, you've seen Pawfnu. Just replace Godzilla with, like, I don't know, like Tucker or something. there you go. That's Pawfnu. Definitely would rework that somewhere down the line. Again, I'm probably not. But, oh my god, it's really just dawning upon me now as I just ramble off my head. Jesus Christ. Now, on to Age of the Sparks. This was a story that I honestly still really like, but I feel as though this is not a good time to tell it when I have the other things to work on. As you all probably know, Age of the Sparks was going to heavily lean into, you know, who the Sparks were. Specifically, Nova and Celeste, which are Void's and Korra's parents. Basically, it'd be their story on how they met and how everything sort of transpired into the events that became the first Journeys Ahead. Obviously, the story, as I said, it'd be about, you know, it was how they met, and the whole dilemma of the story was, you know, because of their nature, you know, the Sparks' whole thing of just going out and fighting constantly over and over and over again, they've lost their numbers. They've pretty much lost hope because, you know, when you constantly fight in battles and lose time and time again, but win very little, it's not a good thing. That whole dilemma, like that collective dilemma just sort of lowered their magic to the point where they couldn't have, like, they couldn't continue on. They couldn't have kids. It was sort of the early signs of the end. So as you know, Nova, being the hard, stern guy he is, he takes on a task to basically go to the Matter Realm to find the, sorry, I'm just reading off the top of my head, but he's going there to play a god's trial to get a wish to save their people. And obviously, you know, Celeste joins him because she wanted to get away from everything that happened with the Song of Serpents side of things, you know, where she killed Betsy, very, very much so scarred Naja, while also tagging along with two other characters who are new, being Cosmos and Sigrun. Obviously, where the story left off, they just got past the Shades, but each chapter would be them essentially going through a realm of the gods. The next chapter after Bolganov's thing was them going to be going through like a Lake of Souls, where they would have encountered Rivara. I think basically I was going to like tease the gods in Age of the Sparks. Like, you know, they'd be there, but not all of them would be, you know, these giant forces. So obviously, they start in the Shades, they pass Rivara, they then enter Elbrus's place, which is basically just hell, and then they go through like the Limbo sector of the Matter Realm, where they would hear Vetrix singing. I wanted one of my friends to voice her, because I still love Vetrix. She's probably one of my favorite designs out of the bunch. And throughout this story, we learn more and more about the characters. We learn that Nova fights as hard as he does is because he had a terrible childhood, a very rough father, a mother who died at a young age. While Celeste, she was sort of a loner. She didn't really know what to do in life. Cosmos and Sigrun were obviously, supposed to be the friend halves, these two. The ones to lift them up. But throughout this journey, Sigrun would be kind of tempted by what I've kind of described as dark matter Valkyries in the story. Because if you don't know, Sigrun is the name of a Valkyrie in Norse mythology. She's a warrior. And, these demons would tempt her because Sigrun's sort of a loose screw. Her whole thing is that she wants to fight the good fight, but she's a struggling warrior, which was going to delve more into her. And basically, she's kind of... it's basically like influenced by a demon sort of thing. So throughout the story, she'd grow more and more like stern, like fed lies by the dark matter. And there would come a point where, when our main group finally reaches the Soleus, Sigrun would have been completely like tricked by the dark matter side of things. The demons in that world, to try and throw them off the path. Because, again, it's a trial of the gods. Sigrun would have been tricked into believing if she did a certain thing, they would all get a wish. Prosperity, in a way. Your typical, religious fall from grace story. And before they enter the Soleus to, see Matira or whoever, Sigrun, with the shotgun she took from the armory, would kill Cosmos, believing that this would give her the strength, basically, to give them what they wanted. This, in turn, would shatter the whole narrative of this friendship. Cosmos would die, Nova's best friend. And, it'd be a back and forth thing of, why the hell did you do that? But Sigrun... Again, I know it's very bare bones, but, there would be, a whole subplot of, these dark matter angels basically, twisting her mind, believing her into a false vision. And so, throughout this whole, dilemma, she just kind of she thinks Nova and Celeste are turning on her. She tries to kill them and makes a run for it. And there would have been a fight. There would have been this really cool fight of them on, the back of a long serpentine dragon. I had this whole thing envisioned out. And it would have ended with Sigrun getting the upper hand over Nova and Celeste, sending them back down to the Shades, which would have delved into a longer aspect of the story of those two climbing back up together, but throughout this time, they sort of realize the love they share for one another, realizing that only together they can make it through. I should also add, throughout the story, Bolganoth would have been hunting them constantly, because of his, nature. Bolganoth was a fallen angel, which means he has the right to pass between both heaven and hell, essentially. He would have been, a lockdown type character, just basically trying to track them down to get them off the path. I like Bolganoth. He's cool. He's like my Shockwave. He's a good boy. But anyways, eventually our two heroes would, after mourning the loss of Cosmos, they would make it back to the Soleus, where they would encounter, they basically go to the area where you're supposed to get the wish. And they would encounter Sigrun on her knees, pleading to the gods. But because of her actions, because of the way she was twisted, controlled, she would actually be punished. This, in turn, would turn basically, I don't know who it would be. I think it was probably Darthian. would turn Sigrid into, like, this very grotesque looking monster. Essentially, like what I had in mind, I'll probably put a rough sketch here in the video. Her legs would sort of like split apart into tendrils akin to how Darfian looked. Her arms would elongate, and her neck would just extend like really long, and she would end up gaining the same dark matter eye as Kor had in Lineage. Basically, she'd be infested with dark matter, but a different kind, because, this is from the god of dark matter herself, or goddess, I should say, my bad. And so the final fight would be basically Celeste and Nova, actually, no, more or less Celeste taking on her friend, because when I was writing it, it kind of slowly became Celeste's story, which didn't coincide with the actual thumbnail, which showed Nova up in front, but again, it would have been a very heartbreaking moment, and I had this really cool like battle theme that I'll slot in here, like just kind of like editing it in. It was cool. I had this whole thing like there would be like shooting stars above their head. Like I had this whole thing sit like planned out. So here's the theme I wanted to use. Anyhow, the fight would have ended with Sigrid not dying, but her falling to the shades to be damned as sort of like a servant to Darfian. And, after the dust settles, maybe Nova and Celeste I doubt they would share a kiss here. I think they'd have one a little bit earlier on to the story. But they would make it to the Soleus, and then they would encounter Seraphon. And, they'd ask him, like, we just want this wish to save our people. But because they both joined together to kill, well, presumably hurt or harm to attempt to kill another spark of their own, they aren't granted a wish because they aren't pure of heart. So this becomes a dilemma of just everything the story's led up to being for nothing. Nova is shattered, Celeste is heartbroken. But because Seraphon is he's the good god, he's actually the nice one, he gives them a hint as to where they would be able to find, a new home to survive. And he tells them, follow the constellations. If you recall in the first Journeys Ahead, Salvaheim is connected to the epicenter of all the constellations in the Omniverse, a safe haven. So he doesn't tell them directly, but he does tell them to follow the constellations, which would lead them to Salvaheim. They'd take his word, they return home, there'd be a cameo from Atira, and the story would have ended, with like a little bit of a time jump to the birth of Void. There would have been a whole scene of, Celeste having the baby, there'd be a little Kor at her side, but there would have been a whole moment of Void's first moments in life. And that's how the story would have ended. But there would be an extra thing after this. The epilogue. The epilogue was one of the things I really was excited to write. And it's still a bit that I really want to do one day, maybe. Like out of all these, Age of the Sparks is probably the story that has the most likely chance of coming back. But the epilogue would have taken place moments after Void was pushed through the portal during the fall of Salvaheim. We would have seen what happened, and Nova and Celeste, they would be greatly wounded. But this epilogue would end with the both of them, trudging their way through the fire until coming atop a large hill in the distance. A hill with a surviving tree, and they would both just sit next to it and watch basically like the ocean of Salvaheim, just trying to find some good in that whole situation. And there would be a moment of just, the two of them leaning against each other, knowing they're going to die. And you would have Celeste saying something like, I don't know who would say it, but one of the parents would say, "Do you think he's going to be all right?" And the other would reply, "He's our son. He'll be fine." Then there'd be like some small talk after that until eventually one of them realizes the other has passed. And after that, it's just kind of a silent, drawn-out moment of one of them. I think it would more than likely be Celeste to be the last one alive, just holding out hope for her son, believing that he will make this right. And that's how the story would have ended. It would have been a very somber ending, but obviously going into it, everyone knew, all you guys know, they wouldn't live. And it would be a very again, it's a very sad sort of situation there, but also very beautiful in my eyes. Again, I know this is very bare bones of describing it all, but man, Age of the Sparks was something I really, I guarantee you I'll probably come back to it at some point. But now on to the whole thing that I feel like would have ruined everything and just made everyone really, really sad. Rise of the Sparks was intended to be like my final outing, I suppose. Like, I wanted it to be sort of the big like climax before I take a break from the series. But with that said, you know, I do like some of the aspects of the story. I just, in the grand scheme of everything that has been done, it would have just undone so much of the positive ending that Beyond had. And honestly, like, granted, I do want there to be like other things post Beyond, but something like this just would not have felt right. That's my cat clawing my bed. Anywho, let's talk about what Rise of the Sparks was going to be. Again, for me personally, I just don't think this would have worked. I think it's a cool story idea, but like, again, this is just something that, for me personally, just didn't really feel right. The story would have opened with Void, Pawfnu, Jay, Florence, Elijah, you know, basically, you know, the vigilante group of people stopping an attack on the city with Dr. Notorio. It would have kind of been like the opening from Revenge of the Fallen, just, you know, sort of like this big group effort to just take down this big machine. And the big premise of this would be, this is all happening on Void's birthday, which he didn't really mind. But it was sort of a thing like, you know, oh great, all this happening on my birthday, when can I get a break? Sort of thing. But it would have just been like a nice bonding moment between everyone. And you'd ask like, you know, where's I think Void would be like, you know, how come your mother isn't tagging along? And Jay'd be like, oh, she's a little busy. So they would take this whole thing down. You know, it's nighttime, Void's about to call it a day. They all get back to the cabin. They go inside and they find that Jida, Vivian, and basically all the other reflections, it's a surprise birthday party. You know, like, everyone's there. You know, you got the reflections, you know, you have Coco, Delilah, really, like, pretty much almost every character from the series. You know, Crescent would be there. It'd just be like this very just tender moment, like this big group of just all these characters that have been brought into the story from 1 to now. But midway through this celebration, they would get a knock at the door. Curiously, they would all turn to the door and open it to find a strange hooded figure. It was a girl, a woman, more likely. She would walk in and be just kind of like this awkward moment, like, you know, this very strange, you know, just like this weird witch from the unknown. Like, she'd walk around, she'd crack a few jokes, being like, oh, you're a colorful bunch. Or like, you got any alcohol? Like she'd just be like this very weird character that no one really knew until she took off her hood to reveal a spark. Sigrid. Obviously, at this point, there's this big dilemma of just, what like, what do you mean? You know, you got Core freaking out, you got Alice Evelyn, you know, everyone's just like, who the hell are you? Where did you come from? You know, again, because it's a spark. But if you recall, Sigrun didn't die. She just became part of the Pantheon in a way, a soldier. And this would quickly escalate into Sigrun basically summoning her wings. She wouldn't transform into her monster form. It's sort of like a Core thing. Like, that monster form only comes out when it's really necessary. But she'd basically tackle Void through the roof and basically get the upper hand of him over the city. Eventually, you know, the others come in, Jida, everyone. They come to help Void. But after that, Sigrun would, like, raise her hand, snap her fingers, and a portal would open, revealing Matira, Darfian, all of them, except for Seraphin, into the world. This would be a moment of Void not understanding what's happening, but when she announces her name, it's like whiplash. Everything is just falling apart in Void's mind. It's like Matira. Like, literally imagine, for say, like, you're walking, and then Jesus Christ himself walks out. It's one of those things. And it's sort of a moment here where Void's just not really understanding. And then Matira starts to rant at him, saying, you destroyed, or you allowed the death of the Beyonders. Like, you, because of your actions, the Beyonders are gone. The creators of all. The ones who designed Matira, basically. She's kind of like saying, like, you know, you, because of your actions, you led a great path of destruction, you know, because without the Beyonders, everything's in chaos. Sure, you know, like, Earth and all that, it's fine, but those cracks, those would have been, like, massive flaws and ramifications along other worlds. And Void didn't really realize this. And because of that, Matira takes it into her own hands to basically rip away everything that Void had, because in her eyes, he defied her. He went against everything the Spark stood for, and penance must be paid, because he ended up really messing up the entire Omniverse that they were meant to protect. And so Matira decides to bring judgment down upon Earth. And what happens is, again, like, I've said this many times, but this story was going to get really dark. Portals open everywhere. Not just Aurora, Leo, everywhere. Every single city that I hadn't touched in the stories yet. Portals would open, and in come would a slew of demons, angels, and all kinds of monsters that we would have seen in Age of the Sparks. And within moments, it is a crisis. Lots of lives are lost. Cities are being torched to the ground. It is the apocalypse. And it's in this moment where Void, everyone, for the first time, like, ever, feels a real sense of just danger for, like, everything. And they flee. They flee because they can't, like, sure, they're a big group. They can't stop this. They don't know what to do. They have no clue what's happening, and all around them, people they recognize are just being obliterated. And that's where the chapter cuts. It would have ended with Void just breathing. It would have just been like an echoed thing. And that's how the first chapter would end. Just a very dark sort of setting for a world that I, again, felt as though left at a pretty nice ending and beyond. Only to just strip that all away into just this very, very depressing mood. Chapter 2 would have focused on a big time jump. I think, yeah, because I've retconned that Void's birthday is July 15th to match with the actual first ever drawing I did of the character. So we would have had a time jump a couple months into December, and it's like nuclear winter. Everyone's hiding under, well, our main group is hiding underground in Aurora in this, like, safe space, Because if you recall, Earth is a high matter-infested, sort of environment. So if they were to travel on the surface, everywhere they would go, it would be like cameras on them. It's bad. It's a bad situation, and everything is just gone to literal shit. And we would see in this little bunker area would be pretty much everyone, both villains and heroes alike, all coming together just to survive. You'd have Void in them, you'd have, some of Roy's worst, Shallow, Notorio would probably be there, just like all these guys that feel like wouldn't click together, but would, you'd have like Lisi's character, like the A and N crew, all those guys. And it's just a moment of them trying to figure out what to do. As far as they're aware, there's no escape. Materia's blocked off all portal passages, like no one can leave Earth. They're trapped, and they can't do anything about it. And throughout this story, Void would just be miserable. He would feel so responsible for everything, and it really wouldn't have been fun to write. It would have been hard to write, because I gave this character like the ending he deserved, and then it would just strip it all away to an even worse state. But throughout this moment in time, Void and crew, they would essentially be like doing like little missions, They'd have their antimatter gear, basically allows them to deflect. It was designed by Nock. It would deflect all the eyes on them from the world. And so they would basically go out and search for survivors to bring back to possibly, nurse back to health. And Chapter 2 would have focused on the crew going to Leo. Basically, to find, I think like what I wanted to do here is that not all the A&N crew would have been basically in Aurora when things went down. So it would be a rescue mission after, I think it would be like Winona or someone. They basically get like an alert from Cece saying that, just basically any transmission, Cece, her family, and all these other types of characters, who've been trapped in Leo for months. So Void and the others, they prepare like a rescue group. They go there, they find Cece, they begin to bring her back, but in this moment, Bolganov would show up, and he would return to his role as he did in Age of the Sparks, as essentially this threat that would constantly chase the group over and over. Doesn't matter where they go. He'd be like, think of him just like as just a hunter. He's the one they send out to just deal with the dirty work. So, they eventually escape Bolganov, they head back, Cece's reunited. It's a happy moment for that crew. But amidst all this, they're trying to actually get Jet back online, because he had all this data on like the Omniverse. Because at this point Jet's been dead since Beyond. He's been dead for a long time. But he is they find it very important, the Jet. He had a lot of intel, so they're trying to get him back online. But because of this online connection, with the internet, something comes through. They get a transmission from none other than Seraphin, basically saying, I'm trapped. They dismantled me. I can help you if you help me. Because again, Seraphin, he's not tricking anyone. He's totally not trying to screw them over. He is a genuine good heart. And so, Void, he takes this message and he's like, how can we trust you? And I don't really know what Seraphin would say after this, but it'd be something that really get Void to think. And so, him and Jida would venture. They basically gives them the coordinates to where he is. I don't exactly know where it would be, but I really wanted to explore every continent on Earth in this story. So he would be on one of those trapped. When they go after him, this would lead into Chapter 3. They eventually go through this, basically like this angelic temple that would have risen from the ground in somewhere. I have no idea where it would have been, but it would have been a very just holy but unholy place. It was supposed to be very creepy. Eventually, after fighting their way through hordes of angels and whatnot, they would eventually find Seraphin, and he is, for the lack of a better, I had no idea how I was gonna present him, but the one idea I had is that he would have been basically crucified in a way, but his body would look akin to the image I'm going to show on screen. Here you have Grimlock, and he's just sort of he's still alive and intact, but it's all by a tether. And so Void reaches Seraphim, and he's like, I can help you, but you're gonna have to take out my power source. And he points to the eye in his chest, which is the eyes of creation, the things Matira had given to all of her children. It's basically their soul essence. This is the thing that keeps them functioning and keeps other things functioning that they control. And so, Void is like, how I know this will work? And Seraphim's just like, if it doesn't work, then I'm sorry. So it's basically a running off chance sort of plotline. So Void, he activates his blade, cuts the eye out, which kills Seraphim and basically his body. The alarms go off, and they kind of head back to the base. When they get back to the base, they're like, we don't know what to do with this. Until Void gets the idea. He looks at Jet, looks at the eye, and he has the idea to maybe implement the eye into Jet's power core, which has been dead. He puts it in, which in turn, after a moment of just like nothing, the eye adapts to Jet, because keep in mind, it's Spark Tech, and it basically creates a fusion of Jet and Seraphim, creating this new character who has, it's sort of, I wouldn't say it's a new character, but it's basically Seraphim, but he's able to adapt to all of Jet's abilities, which in turn makes him a fighter and a very smart cookie. And so, Jet is reborn as, he's not like an AI anymore. Like, he's an actual thinking, living creature now. And that's how Jet would have returned. And after this, now that he's got a new body, Seraphim is able to basically give them all the intel they need. And they learn the only way to take down Matira is if they take down the other gods. If they take out the eyes, they'll shut down, which in turn will lower Matira's basically I think it was going to be a thing where I wanted to have them all sort of interlock with her, like without them she can't keep up a force field or something like that. Some typical plot line to just keep the story going. And so Seraphim acts as his body's slowly rebuilding from the mangled corpse that it is. They take his word, and he's sort of just this guide throughout the story. And so this would lead them all. This would in turn lead to the entire group splitting off in the sectors to go and get these eyeballs. And so the rest of the story would commence. Chapter 4 would follow Void, Jida, Joe. I'm not sure. It would involve the main Novasun crew, the ones we all know and love, traveling to another basically angel temple where they would find Sabarath, which is the divine tinkerer of the gods. This is basically just be a whole plot, character growth, all that junk. And they would essentially, obviously, they would get the upper hand over Sabarath and take out his eye. And it would lead to, the other gods kind of coming in as holograms. And I had this really cool, well, I think it's a cool line, but, Matira would have a freak out moment, because number one, Seraphim's gone, which is one shield down. Now Sabarath is gone, which is another shield down. And she'd rant about something along the lines of, "You dare defy me?" Something like that. And Void would just look over his shoulder and just sort of be like, "You defied yourself." Basically spitting at Matira for completely going against what she stood for, and kind of calling her a hypocrite for, destroying this world, all because of what Void did. She's a very hypocritical character, and she's very petty. The next chapter would focus upon the trash pack, going to... Now, keep in mind, this was before I made the change to trash pack taking place before. So, in this sort of scenario, Quinn is a begrudging, sort of a little dickbag. And they would go to another, basically, I wanted this to be sort of I wanted them to go to Rome, the Journey's Ahead version of Rome, where they go into, I guess, this version of the Colosseum, where they would fight Rhodos. And it would be a sort of thing, just being Rhodos calling Jay a half-breed. But the irony there is because Rhodos, he himself looks like half a horse. I don't know, it was the idea I had in mind. It would just sort of be again, hypocrisy with the gods. And I'm not sure how it would go down, but eventually Jay and Quinn would work together to take down Rhodos. And, there'd be a moment of recollection there for the two friends. After that, I'm trying to think. Right. Chapter 6 would focus upon what I think... I'm really trying to remember here. But all I know is that it would involve Kor, Joby, Comet, Atlas, and Evelyn. And I don't really remember which god they would fight. I can't recall if it was Rivara or Elbrus. But the key thing that would have happened in this chapter is that Atlas would have died. He would have died sacrificing himself to save the others. Which, again, I don't really recall how he was going to die. All I know is that he's definitely going to do the sacrifice play. But, yeah, no, Atlas would have kicked the bucket in the scene to get the eye. Sorry. Now, Chapter 7 would feature all the reflection characters. You got Vivian, V, T, all those guys. And they would have fought, trying to think of her name. Yeah, they would have fought Liv Flora. I don't know how this would all go down. I just think it'd be cool to just, plant-like character, they take her out, get her eye, character growth, you know how it all goes. And there would also be, the next chapter after that would have been another one, which I feel like could have possibly just ruined everything, I'm gonna be honest. So the next chapter would have featured basically it involved Vetrix, the swimming one, the mermaid. And it would have featured Void, Coco, and Shallow working together because they're underwater based. It would be underwater, so Void wanted primary underwater characters. And in the scuffle, Coco, like Atlas, would have sacrificed herself. And I really don't know how anyone's going to react to that. But yeah, I was really thinking about Coco biting the dust. Yeah, no, it would have just been another harrowing moment for not only all the characters, but she would leave behind, I think it was Lolo? Yeah, Lolo. Yeah, it again, this was a very sad story that would have been really hard for me to write. So after that chapter, we would, I believe, it'd be the one that involved it would have involved Rivara. I kind of wanted this chapter to be sort of about the side characters, like Sangston, Alfred, Crescent. Basically the characters you don't really think about, the ones that come to mind in Journeys Ahead. But it would have been a little chapter featuring all of them, just, working together, the Misfit crew, I suppose. Maybe the A&N crew would be in there, I don't really know. But it was an idea I was toying with. Didn't really get that far in the thought process, but hey. Now, we kind of enter the parts where things just get really messed up. So, the next chapter that, follows this, it would involve, them tracking down Darfian, which would have been the last god basically alive, the sister to Seraphon. And this would evolve into a sort of climax moment where basically the crew that was gonna, fight her, they would actually be ambushed by a matter dragon she had, leaving the battle to a now functioning jet Seraphon jet, whatever you want to call him. And I was kind of taking inspiration from, don't judge me when I say this movie's name, but The Last Knight. Primarily the fight between Optimus and Bumblebee. You can tell, basically just the theme of, these are siblings. These are friends, literal, brothers and sisters in arms. And it's just this kind of sad fight, you got Darfian screaming, look what they did to you. You want to fight? You want to fight for them? And Seraphon is just desperately trying to remind her, even though she's dark matter, remember what we stood for. And it's just a very somber moment when, meanwhile below, Void is fighting a matter dragon's Optimus versus Grimlock. But of course, the fight would end with Seraphon getting the upper hand and basically shutting down the whole system that Darfian is in. As it's all coming down, Void at this point would have tamed the dragon, a new dog, new pet. He would have flown in, picked up Seraphim, and left Darthian to just crumble. So when they get back to the base, this will be the next chapter after that, they have all the eyes, and they're able to craft armor, which can provide them, both protection, but also I guess a blessing. I wasn't really thinking, I didn't really think about it too much at this point, but I have some concept art here of Void wearing the armor. He would have gotten a sword, really leaning into, the Spark Knight aspect of things. Void would have had armor, Jay would have had armor, really the primary characters would have had armor. But before they venture off, the track material, they have all the eyes now, all the eyes that are needed, all of the kin are dead. They plug the eyes in, they find her spot, which is I don't remember where it would be, but it'd be in the center of the world or something like that. Not literally in the world, but on top of it somewhere, I don't know. But before they venture, they're ambushed by a group of dark matter Valkyries and light matter Valkyries, being led by Sigrun. And in this sudden attack, keep in mind, this would have played heavily more so into the trash pack side of things, but during the scuffle, Sarv and Tucker, they would have leapt in front of Quinn and taken a fatal blow for him, leaving Quinn without any family, at least in his mind. So Sarv and Tucker would have died. Yeah, I didn't really want to pull any punches with this one. And so this would lead into Void kind of entering his sort of rage mode. Because I remember, I envisioned it being stormy. He would summon the lightning, he'd become his yellow form, and it would be Void versus Sigrun. And the whole fight, it would just sort of be because up to this point, Void doesn't realize that this is technically his aunt. But obviously, Sigrun and Celeste aren't related. Sigrun was Celeste's best friend. So obviously, he doesn't realize this, but, as a listener, you're going to think, oh my god, the son of Celeste is fighting her best friend. And so, the fight would come to a very, hard stalemate. Everyone else takes on the other Valkyries, while Void takes on Sigrun. Eventually, Sigrun does fall, but in her final moments, she kind of, snaps back to who she was. And even though she obviously doesn't really understand what's happening, she looks into Void's eyes and recognizes that it's Celeste. And she just kind of knows. Obviously, she's partially aware of what's happening. But in that moment, she would have said something along the lines of, "You've got your mother's eyes." And she would pass. Obviously, Void's gonna be what? Huh? Obviously, I feel Seraphim would explain, I guess in the following chapter after this. But it's just a somber moment, Sarv and Tucker are gone. You have Quinn kind of mourning them. And keep in mind, this is in the moments of Quinn just kind of starting to forgive Jay and basically the Novasons. And all that trust he had just gained is now gone. He is miserable. No, he's not miserable. He's too stunned to speak. They're trying to, they're all like Jay, Florence, and them. They're trying to get Quinn to stand. But in my mind, the scene would have played out he wouldn't have screamed. He wouldn't have cried. He would have literally just stood up, slowly drift towards the door, and just fade. He would just leave, and that obviously would have played in the trash pack whenever that came about. But at that point, Quinn just exits the story, and you don't know where did he go? Again, really just sad. You can see why you can see why this is just really depressing, dude. But anyways, this would lead into the final act, the final two chapters of what would have been, I guess, Journeys Ahead climax. The last two chapters would have seen all of our characters coming together, those that are left, uniting in these machines that Noct created to basically take the fight to the gods themselves. In that moment, it's really just harrowing and sad sort of feeling, like, oh, we're going to battle, but at the same time, you don't know if anyone's going to make it out. I wanted to really write it to just be like, anyone could die at that point. And so they all basically charge into was essentially like the Soleus emerged on Earth, and it's really just a big battle. Like again, my biggest inspiration was the Battle of Chicago from Dark of the Moon. Like just that whole scenario. And while throughout it, you got like everyone in their machines, but you got Void on his dragon. And it's basically just like a big charge into was essentially, heaven. So obviously they all fight through it. You got eventually Bolganov would show up and be like a final stand between him and Void. Seraphim tries to convince his son, but Bolganov's gone. He's too much of a threat. He's lost his mind. And so Void, he takes him out. But near like the tail end of like this large battle, they kind of realize that this could be it. And it's even worse because Void realizes that only sparks can enter the Soleus. And he basically kind of thinks to himself, this is it. And so there's this very just sad moment. I had the whole thing like sketched out in my mind. You have Void there, and you have everyone else. Jida, Jay, little baby Jane, just like, got Core, you got Joby, Pawfnu, everyone's there. And Void, he thinks this is it. He bids his farewells, and, him and Jida share a long and just, I don't know, it's just a very depressing moment between the two of them. They share, like, one final kiss, because, she realizes that this is probably the last time she's going to see the guy that saved her life, pretty much. Before Void enters, you got Jay running up behind him, kind of like tugging on him, like, Dad, please, don't go. Don't go. And so, Void turns around, places a hand on his shoulder, he kneels, he takes off his guitar necklace, the one Jida had given him back in Song of Serpents, drapes it over Jay's neck, and places a hand to his heart and says, take care of your mother for me. Because Void is fully expecting to die. After this, Void bids farewell to his son, and he enters the Soleus, where the final battle ensues. Around him, he confronts Matira, they share words. Again, I don't really know exactly what they would say in this scenario, but I do know it would be some heavy dialogue. Void would probably ask, why weren't you there when the glitches came? Matira would give some stupid reason. It just would have been like a very, like, heavy moment. So Void, with spear in hand, takes on his very creator that he had basically looked up to his entire life, swore to. And the battle would have... I really wanted the battle to be, like, angelic. I wanted the two to be, like, flying through the air around, like, this giant pillar of light that basically just, and I also wanted, like, around them, you could see, like, faint souls of, all the sparks who had passed were now, like, collected into, like, this heavenly state. The ones who don't fight, the ones who just stare. And as Void fights on, I wanted to do a thing, like, in the background. I wanted to have me and a lot of my friends just kind of shout, no spark saw. And if you remember back when Age of the Sparks was coming out, that translated to fight, spark, fight. It would have literally been the spirits of sparks that have long since passed, basically cheering on this, like, pretty much still this kid by Sparks, Spark standards, going up against the very god that was supposed to, stand for what they believed in, who had completely turned. Void fights on and on, but he eventually loses, he eventually starts losing his grasp. All the while, Seraphim is still kind of like his AI buddy. Like, at this point, he's kind of like speaking through, like, his mask. It gets to the point where Void's on his hands and knees, desperately just, thinking he lost. And I don't know how. This is the part that hasn't worked out yet, but Seraphim would reach into the Soleus itself, which is, this thing of light. And before Matira strikes him down, Void would be saved. He would look up to see both his mother and father as spirits manifested by Seraphim's power aiding him in the fight. It would have come full circle. Void, he started his journey by losing his parents, and the final climax would be him fighting alongside his parents. Again, this was the reason why I wanted to do Ages of Sparks, would be to set up this very climactic moment that had like an understanding for the parents. And so, you know, Void, Nova, and Celeste, they all band together, while at the same time, you know, other sparks began to sort of chime in. You know, sparks that, you know, that have passed, you know, Seraphine's like pulling on all the tethers he can to give Void a fighting chance. You have sparks such as Cosmos. You know, all these like different sparks from like the first chapter, you know, like from not the first story, like, you know, like Jerry, all that, you know, just like the spirits of the sparks fighting back, you know, help Void win the fight against, you know, just a single world, just one world to save, because that's what sparks are meant to do. And together they fight, and eventually Void gets the upper hand over Matira and rips out her Eye of Creation. This moment kind of leads to the Soleus collapsing and everyone on the ground thinking that Void just died. You know, Jaida's the first to kind of like run to the scene, like she's warping across the city, you know, just in shambles. Like she's thinking she just lost her husband. You know, you got Jay right behind her, you know, thinking like, oh my god, dad's gone. Just faintly holding out for hope. You know, you got Jaida kind of talking through her subspace, just pleading for Void to respond. Everything seems lost, you know, he's gone. Like, they won, but at what cost? They see a light. They see a red and blue light emerging from the fog. Around their shoulders was Void being carried by the spirits of his mom and dad. Void, he's very badly wounded. Like, he is like 5 inches away from death, but he's alive. He's slowly healing. And it's this big moment of relief, you know, like cheering and all that. You know, it's this big, like, encore. Like, they won, and Void is still alive. And of course, you know, you have moments of just Nova and Celeste. You know, obviously they can't stay forever, they're spirits. But there's a moment of them reconnecting with Core. You know, Core being like, I'm sorry, but, you know, to say, like, you know, we saw what you did, we forgive you. Which would have revealed, you know, the vision Core saw in the matter vat, that was actually them. It wasn't his mind. It was really them. You know, you'd have Jay and Joby meeting their grandparents. Like, it was supposed to be a very, like, tender scene when all this was over. But there would be one little resolution. Now with the Eye of Creation, since it was, you know, destroyed, or I guess, like, reset from its host, it's basically now, it can be used by anyone. Basically to start anew. The eye is fully like restored itself. And so everyone kind of collectively agrees, you know, we can't just leave this around, we got to give it to someone who can trust it with the power. They give it to Seraphine, which in turn transforms Jet. Well, actually, I wouldn't say it transforms Jet. Basically, they take out the eye that was Seraphine's from Jet's body, which kind of leaves Jet reactivated, like back to normal. Although he kind of retains his very sentient sort of mindset. But they combined Matira's eye with Seraphine's eye, in turn blooming him back to life into the new god of the sparks. Like, the new, I guess, like the new Matira, like the father. And so, you know, he kind of makes a vow, like, I'm gonna do what I can to set things right. And he basically says, you know, Earth will heal, but it will take a long time for that. And so, essentially what happens is, you know, after Nova and Celeste bid farewell, Seraphine, he says, you know, like I'll have, like, Seraphine, like, basically dawns upon himself to repair Earth, which will take a couple years. But during that time period, he offers everyone a new place to stay. Where does he take them? Salvaheim. The story would end with a new matter god among the stars, you know, setting things right. Obviously, the Beyonder stuff is still broken, but the theme still applies of just, you know, free will. You know, everything's free now. You know, there's no control. You know, things will sort itself out. And the story would have ended, you know, obviously you got people working in Salvaheim now, like, building huts, you know, like, starting points to a new world. But the main story would end with Void and Jida sitting on that same tree that Nova and Celeste passed away on. Like, a lot have been lost, friends, tons of families. It's sort of just this ending realization of, we're going to be all right. Because the way with Age of the Sparks ended with uncertainty, Rise of the Sparks ends with a feeling of hope for a new tomorrow. And that's how the story would have concluded. Depressing as hell, I know. I should also just jump in and say I'm in the editing frame here. Number one, I apologize for saying so many times. I don't know why I'm like that, but it is. But two, there was a thing Seraphin said about the fact that now that he is the new creator, the sparks will rise again. Hence the name. It's not about the gods. It's the fact that sparks will once again flourish into the world. I don't know if I said there, but I am very sorry. But there was a plot point there about the sparks returning that would have gone further on if I were to continue dragging my foot through this mud. Anyways, back to past me. And that would have been the materia duology and the other things I wanted to work on. Again, I like some of these ideas, but just after Beyond, I just don't know if that would have worked well. In my mind, stories like that are cool, but is a story like that worth telling? Is it okay to just basically undo everything and tell an even worse story with kind of a similar ending? Do these characters that people deserve to go? Thoughts like that. I know you probably hear me. I'm pacing as I talk, but it's just one of those things where I've been really conflicted on. Hence why I'm halting on everything, moving on to draft 2 to see if maybe that could even work in the story. Because in my mind, the ones the stories I really have fleshed out are just 1 to 6. Those are the main ones I have fully solidified. Oh, excuse me. But other than that, it's just sort of, one of those things that I need a lot more time to think on. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think about this? Would it work? Would it not? Generally, because you guys are the audience, and these stories are made for you guys. So, tell me, would this be a story that you think would actually fit into the main narrative that I've made, or am I right in saying this would not have worked? Seriously, let me below. I'm curious. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about it. Yeah, that's about it. See you guys around. Be sure to. Who am I kidding? No one likes and subscribes, no matter how much you ask. No one likes and subscribes because people only care about Kirby on this channel. I know you're there, you motherfucker.